If you've ever had that quiet feeling that you were never meant to fit in, that no matter where you were, something just felt off. I don't think you're wrong, and I also don't think you're weird. That feeling usually means you're in an environment that can't actually hold you. I want to share how I've come to understand that feeling, not as something to fix, as something to interpret differently. Because for a long time myself, I thought something was actually wrong with me, and it wasn't. What I eventually realized is that the rooms I kept standing and putting myself in were far too small to hold me and who I was becoming. I'm not here to give you advice or tell you what to do with your life. That's completely up to you. I'm not offering answers. I'm just reframing the way I now see this problem based on what I myself have lived through. At the end of this video, you will understand why I myself felt like I was never meant to fit in, and why when I stopped trying to, things began to change. Not because I improved for others, but because I started standing in my own authenticity and putting myself first. I think one important thing that I had to understand was that my suffering was different. We all go through different types of suffering, some worse than others, and some that we can't even comprehend. What I learned with my suffering and the type of person that I had to become was I was different. You know, everybody's different. We all have our own problems. But sometimes, you know, you might see that awkward, weird kid that sits in the corner that has different tastes and different interests that for some reason likes trains a lot more. I've always been into, for example, YouTube, creating videos, editing. I used to be that one kid that had the iPad and would create caricatures of pictures from people around the schools in year 7, 8, 9, and 10 and get paid for it. Or I would record YouTube videos from, I'd say 12 in the night at the age of like 13 and wake up in the morning at like 6 and then edit those videos. I was never the conventional boy that enjoyed playing football. I always expressed myself differently. The friend groups that I had were not of the conventional groups that other children my age would have. I wasn't involved in fighting sports. I wasn't involved in any sort of full-on physical contact sports. And it got to a point where, you know, I would get, I'd say, bullied by other children. Not necessarily bullied. I wouldn't say I ever really got bullied, but I would be spoken down on in a sense where it was as if I wasn't good enough for who I was. I should have been a strong, you know, masculine, angry type of boy, not an intelligent or creative person. I was supposed to be a lot more physical like everybody else. And that sort of fragments your identity, especially when you're born in London and you've got to fit a certain mold. You've got to be hard, you've got to be cool, you've got to be angry, you've got to be rich, you've got to have money, you've got to have a beautiful girlfriend. And then I went down that path and I followed that. And I became that type of person. And I started to realize that throughout my whole life, I'm never actually living my own life. I was living the life that everybody else wanted to live. I was doing the businesses that everybody else wanted to do. The type of person that I was becoming, I was scared to be myself because the rooms that I was standing in weren't able to hold me. The suffering that I had gone through of me being alone, choosing myself, uploading videos, creating art, being creative, I felt ashamed to be that person. I think something I would tell myself is, don't be afraid to be you. Be authentic to yourself. Not because it's there's a massive benefit to it, because there is, but for your own mental health's sake. You know, I've seen my mental health drastically improve, not in weeks, not in months, not in years, but in days, when I started to be myself, being unapologetically myself, doing what I want, speaking how I want, saying what I want. I used to choose not to be happy because it felt cooler to be angry and have a stank face and walk around as if you're going to hurt the next person you see. I used to actually make myself upset simply so I could fit in to the psyche of the environment around me, because I was too scared to expand into the environment, thinking that people wouldn't like me. I used to actually choose to be upset. And then I started to think and ask myself, is that schizophrenia? Is that me choosing to be somebody else? Is that strength or is that weakness? And it wasn't who I was. You know, your environment really does dictate who you become and who you are. You know, you're born wherever you are and you can't control that. You get the religion you get, you can't control that. You get the hobbies you get from your parents or whatever, you can't control that. It creates you. When you stop to step out of your authenticity to become somebody else, you essentially produce the environment to be anxious, to be depressed, because you're not living a life as congruent with yourself. And I think that's the biggest thing I would have told myself about authenticity. Yes, it's about being you. We can talk about, okay, let's just be ourselves now. Let's set some values. Let's, blah, blah, blah. No, really ask yourself, if you weren't in the environment that you were in, and I think it's difficult because it's easy to answer a question, but it's better to live the question. If you were to not be in the environment that you are in right now, in gloomy old London, when everybody's depressed and nobody wants to talk to each other, what type of person would you be? Better question, who do you want to be? And the first things that usually come to your mind are the desires of your heart. Things that come to mind for me and would have come to mind for myself when I was younger. I want to be sociable. I wasn't very sociable. I was quite timid. I was quite closed off. I was quite, scared to communicate with people because I didn't know how. Because I was a completely different person than the type of person I was portraying. I was acting like the old hard guy, but really and truly, I wanted to be compassionate. I wanted to be nice to people. I wanted to help people out. I wanted to show people that, we don't have to be all hard. I always thought about it. Why do we act like we're so angry all the time? Or because it's cool to act like that? If self-hatred got you what you wanted, I think a lot of people would have what they wanted. But it doesn't work like that. It's the opposite. But who would you be if you weren't in your environment? Somebody that, I don't know, opens businesses that they're not fearful of posting or creating content because they're not worried about what other people think. Or maybe you'd travel more. Maybe you'd even enjoy your life a lot more. Even if I could say this with a shadow of a doubt, if I had the same mindset and I went to a different country where there was sun and there was loads of activities to do, I'd still sit in my room and watch TV because I didn't understand letting go and becoming myself authentically. Genuinely, I look at the younger version of myself, and it's difficult because you're not taught certain things, you have to learn it. And I guess that's just process of life. But you're different for a reason. You're not you're not part of the pack because you have different views, you have different like opinions, you're creative in different ways, you think differently. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not autistic or silly or dumb or none of that. You think differently, you act differently, you love differently, you care differently, you're creative differently. You don't have to fill the pack of 100 guys that love football or want to, I don't know, go out, drink and smoke and party or have meaningless hookups. That's not you. You don't want to do that. You don't need to do that. And it's weird because it sounds like cliche advice, it's difficult when you're in an environment where everybody's doing that. You feel wrong and you feel weird for not doing it yourself. And it's even worse when you don't have the parents and the father figures or just the figures in general, the positive role models to tell you, wait a minute, you don't need to act like that. You're off on your own short-handed mind, 15, 16 years old, and you've got to figure that out yourself. I think that's something I would tell myself is you haven't got to worry about that. Even now, to be honest, you could be at 25, 26, and everybody around you is doing degenerate things. Nobody wants to really work on themselves because working on yourself is hard, isn't it? But I think one thing I will stick to, even I'm 24 now, even into my later years, is I'm going to stay authentic to myself. And it's not going to be easy. I understand it's going to be hard and I'm going to fail and I'm going to have moments where I don't follow my values as much as I should. And, that will affect me. I think when you don't follow your values, when you become somebody else, you become anxious, you develop neuroses, you become depressed because you're depressing your emotions. That's what depression is, isn't it? I will fail, but I think you have to fail to learn. So what I would ask myself and what I'm going to continue asking myself, I think, is how can I show up and be Jermaine? How can I show up and be myself and not be, I don't know, Michael or Greg or Tanya or whoever the hell? How can I be me? And if I don't be me, how can I bring myself back into line so I can move forward? Yeah, that's what I tell myself.